So this is a Sex by Design, a new account of the animal sexes by Maximiliana, Jewett, Rifkin, and Justin Garson in Biology and Philosophy is forthcoming. So feel free to ask questions. We're going to be talking about, what is it to be for an animal to be female or male? So here we go. Yeah. All right, so sex and anisogamy. Anisogamy? Don't know. Take an individual of any animal species you like, assuming that the species in question has some female and some male members. What is it for an individual of that species to be male? We'd like to answer this question in a way that doesn't depend on which species you choose. Okay, so we already are going to be running the gamut of first of all, the idea of biological species is very difficult, to pin down. It's really hard to draw lines between certain species when one species is another one. It's complicated as hell. So even the fact that you've got a species, who knows? And yeah, Maddie's agreeing. It's complicated, and also self-awareness. I don't know. I just don't know what is going into this. And if you're talking about people, I mean, God forbid you wade into the politics and culture wars we're currently waging here in the United States and across the world. I mean, go play Harry Potter and see if you get yourself into, and you can walk into an argument. So this is it. Yeah, exactly, Maddie. And also, some organisms can change sex, and so and I'm sure they know this. But here's the thing: any species, whatever, can you define it? That just seems nearly impossible from the just abstract standpoint. So I don't know. We'll see what they have to say though. Maddie says we can have a local female lion where after the male lion died, she grew a mane and took on male lion traits. Yeah, there are so many things. Of course, I remember back in the day I was watching Jurassic Park, and just you have certain frogs that can change spontaneously from male to female and back again, and it's and then all of a sudden, spoiler alert, it happens to the dinosaurs too, and then they lose their genetic control over the dinosaurs in Jurassic Park. Sorry for spoiling that movie, but yeah, but these are well-known cases, so I'm sure these people know this too. So this isn't really, it's just from the get-go it's worrisome, but they know this. They're not this is a published paper in a respected journal. They are not this oblivious. Continuing, one motivation for asking this question is that it arises quite naturally from some of the core explanatory goals of evolutionary biology. One of the outstanding questions of evolutionary biology is why sexual reproduction evolved at all from the asexual condition of our earliest ancestors. To explain this phenomenon, it would be helpful to have a perfectly general definition of the sexes, males and females. While we're restricting our discussion to animal kinds rather than plant or fungal kinds, we suspect that our view will be relevant to thinking in those areas as well. Here are some answers to the question of what it is to be male that cannot be correct. First, being male cannot be the same as having a penis. Most birds and fish do not have a penis. Intriguingly, in bark flies, the female has a protruding genital called a gynosome, which she inserts into the male to collect sperm. Well, I mean, it is an assumption, but they're giving the reasons why you think not. It's okay. So yeah, because the bark flies have a gynosome, which is kind of like a dick. Okay. Moreover, some males can lack a penis through accidental damage. Second, being male cannot be the same thing as having the XY chromosome. Male alligators do not have sex chromosomes at all. Their sex is determined by the temperature at incubation. Third, it cannot be having a large amount of testosterone cycling through one's body. Male hypogonadism is a condition in which a male infant produces far less than the average amount of testosterone. Some theorists despair of finding a general answer to this question at all. For example, Anne Fausto Sterling argues on the basis of such examples that there is no such thing as sex simpliciter. Rather, we must decompose sex into numerous variables, gonadal sex, genital sex, hormonal sex, which can be mixed and matched in any individual. In a similar vein, Sarah Richardson argues that there is no single universal definition of, for example, maleness, but that scientists must operationalize maleness in different ways in different research contexts. In some contexts, maleness will be operationalized in terms of hormones, in others, genetics, in still others, behavior. Maddie says hypogonadism is a type of intersex. Yeah, sure. And so this is a thing, but they know this, and this is why they're bringing it up, is like because they're saying, look, you can't say that like maybe you need a third category here, an intersex, male female intersex, but like fine, but this is why they're saying it's hard to define. This is all that's happening here. You can take issue with what they're saying, but this is all introductory stuff saying, okay, it's hard to define this. All right. No, keep asking questions, Maddie, but like that's the point here, is that they're just like hand waving. It's like, you're right, but they are literally just, this is all hand waving right here. Like, oh yeah, example. This makes it difficult. So, like, I'm just talking about the structure of what they're doing. You're right for pointing it out. Alright, authors think such despair is premature. Instead, we align ourselves with those philosophers of biology and other theorists who think sex is grounded in some manner or another in the phenomenon of anisogamy. This is a very standard view in the sexual selection literature. I have no idea what anisogamy is, but this is what they're saying it is. Anisogamy. Most sexually reproducing species are anisogamous. This means that members of the species can produce two very different sorts of sex cells, gametes, eggs, or sperm. One of the most remarkable differences between human sperm and egg is their size difference. A human egg is about 100,000 times larger than a sperm. They also differ in shape and function. Not all sexually reproducing species are anisogamous. There are some species, mostly unicellular, that are isogamous. They use sexual reproduction, but their sex cells are fairly uniform in size. Maddie says, anisogamy is a form of sexual reproduction that involves the union or fusion of two gametes that differ in size and or form. The smaller gamete is male, the sperm cell, whereas the larger gamete is female, typically an egg cell. Anisogamy is predominantly among multicellular organisms. Yeah. That's a quote, so it seems like this is where this is what these authors want to talk about. Okay. So, interestingly, biologists do not partition such species into male and female, but into different mating types. This is a mark of how deep the understanding of animal sex in terms of anisogamy runs in biology. Okay, so that's the Wikipedia. Yeah, I mean, it seems like they're using basically a similar thing right up here. The remarkable differences in sperm and egg is their size. One's just 100,000 times bigger. So it's pretty easy to pick them out based on size factors. Alright. To the extent that one believes that biology has some special authority to shape our ontology of sex, for example, the way that biologists talk and think about sex should inform our understanding of what animal sex is, then anisogamy seems to be the correct starting point. Of course, not everyone accepts that biology has any special authority to shape our ontology of sex. I mean, you can define anything any which way you want. Like, really, you can define, like, this philosophy, you can define it in terms of this if you want. Like, so we're just going to call all things that have very small sexual reproduction cells male, and all things that have comparatively larger ones female. And if you just define it that way, fine. But, like, is that going to be useful in any way other than just describing the size of the sperm and the egg? Like, is that all you're doing? But, like, of course you can. And does it have some sort of does that have any other repercussions along the way? I don't know. Like, you have to give a deeper thing, because you can define yourself into this situation. I just did. Like, but that's, again, but definitions are cheap. I can just do that right here, and like, so did they. But it took 2 sentences. That doesn't mean anything in the long run. Okay. Authors say, even if we agree that anisogamy is the right starting point for thinking about the animal sexes, there are still open questions about how precisely an animal sex relates to anisogamy. The most simple and obvious theory is that all it is to be female is to be able to produce eggs, and all it is to be male is to be able to produce sperm. An animal that can produce both eggs and sperm would be both male and female, or hermaphroditic. We call this the simple starter theory of sex. Versions of the theory have been advanced by Roughgarten, Griffiths, and Khalidi. The simple starter theory, however, can't be correct for reasons that are widely acknowledged. First, on this theory, people who are infertile for life would be neither male nor female. Second, postmenopausal females would not actually be female. Third, juvenile males would not actually be male. The problem with these consequences is not just that they're counterintuitive. We have no interest in basing our argument upon the dull thud of conflicting intuitions, as Bigelow and Pargetter so memorably put it. Rather, we think this conclusion contravenes ordinary biological usage, the very usage that the theory is trying to capture. We think an account of sex that does not have these consequences is, all things equal, preferable to one that does. Moreover, we do not accept a graduated conception of sex that treats fertile males and females as something like the paradigm case of maleness or femaleness, and postmenopausal females or juvenile males as marginal or borderline cases. We don't believe that fertility somehow enhances the degree to which one possesses the property of being male or female, or that a postmenopausal female is a female only in a derived or secondary manner. After all, in each of these cases, there remain biological elements of anisogamy. Okay, so already right here, they're saying it's more than just the size of the egg or of the sperm. There are remains of biological elements of anisogamy. So there is something else going on here, whatever it is. And so they've already expanded on their conception. The problem for the authors then is to figure out how to respect the role of anisogamy in defining sex while expanding the inclusion criteria for being female or male. Put differently, how should we ground maleness or femaleness in anisogamy while avoiding the pitfalls of the simple starter theory? We think the missing ingredient here is design. We find it surprising that the admittedly colloquial concept of design has rarely surfaced in the philosophical discussions of sex, partly because of how ubiquitous the concept of design is in thinking about the living world. Maybe recently, and I only mean like in contemporary stuff, but the concept of design in stuff has been around since at least Aristotle. Like, Aristotle had a teleological theory, and this has been massively influential over the centuries and millennia. So the idea that like the concept of design has rarely surfaced in the full discussions of sex is wrong. It's just wrong in terms of history. Not in terms of maybe the last 50 years about talking about this, which they're probably discussing. And exactly, Maddie. And after Aristotle comes Christianity too. Absolutely. Like, there's huge amounts of design thought in the West. But maybe I know what they're saying, but it's just like this one sense is just like demonstrably wrong. But they're probably only talking the last 50 years of analytic philosophy. And that's a backlash against all the history of philosophy. So I wouldn't say that it has rarely surfaced. It's just that we are currently in a backlash against the last 2 millennia and farther back, last few millennia of human thought along these lines. So, yeah, often to say that a body part or process is designed to do such and such is to say that it is an adaptation for such and such. Yeah, this is just we mean adaptation. We're not saying designed. But like, clearly this is exactly the point of adaptation. This word in its semi-current form has only been around for 150 years or 160 years since Darwin published. So this is like, in the history of philosophy, this is a very, very recent thing. Okay, to say that the female barkfly's gynosome is designed for collecting sperm is to say that it is an evolved adaptation for collecting sperm. And Darwin's great achievement in biology is often described in terms of showing how there can be design without a designer. Yeah. Maddie Holmes says design just feels like it has a lot of baggage. It does. And that's why they say this is Darwin's great achievement right here. But like, it's funny because this literally contradicts exactly what they just said in the first line of this paragraph, because it wouldn't be a great achievement if it had been rarely surfaced in philosophical discussions of sex. Like, this line down here, the green, contradicts this yellow right here. So it's just, I know what they mean. It was just not an elegant presentation of what they wanted to say. Yeah, and exactly. Lamarck Maddie says, was also talking of design concepts as well decades before Darwin. No, well, that's what people were saying back in the day. And so they were trying to figure out how animals appear to be designed in some sort of naturalistic way. And they couldn't quite get it right until Darwin came around and had a better theory than Lamarck. Of course, Lamarck was the theory basically that animals would change themselves as they needed to be changed by, like, in their environment, like over the course of their lives. Darwin was doing it more by the underlying random mutations that gave you a benefit over time. Yeah, that's right. And like, so these were sciences. Like, Lamarck was an evolutionist before Darwin. They wanted to show progress of like an evolution of species over time. The question was the mechanism by which it happened, and Lamarck did not have the correct mechanism, although he's had a little bit of a resurgence lately with epigenetics. But yeah, but like these ideas were in the air. But like Darwin, the fact that like you can tell you what Darwin did in these terms is because everything was in design. Okay. Epigenetics is Lamarck's revenge. I mean, I don't know enough about it right now. I just know that he's gotten brought up. I find it very sort of tongue-in-cheek. They're just, you know, people are saying it. Ivan Neo, what's up? What's up? How you doing? Hope you're well. I find it funny. I think people are just bringing Lamarck up so that they can say Darwin was wrong, because that sounds impressive. But, yeah. Trying to make an academic splash. A splash in the academic world. Okay. So, oh man, I'm already annoyed with these people. Even without further elaboration, the design criterion seems to avoid the pitfalls of the simple starter theory. First, it implies that postmenopausal females are, in fact, female because they are designed to produce eggs. Ooh, who's that? We got Descartes. Very nice. Is that like your little Descartes? Yeah, it looks like that's you, right? Nice Descartes. Oh, it's a Nick Cage Descartes. Oh my god, okay. Maddie says, I had a physical anthropologist who was studying non-Darwinian evolutionary inheritance patterns in native tribes years before epigenetics was found. Yeah. Yeah, so this is the thing. Like, you can find this non-Darwinian evolutionary inheritance patterns. It does exist in limited areas. So, but like, yeah. You think, therefore you cage. That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Okay, so, yeah, so if you have this design thinking, it implies that juvenile males are males because they are designed to produce sperm. Of course, this immediately raises the question of what it is for an individual to be designed to produce eggs or sperm, and whether design can be treated as anything but a colorful metaphor. Cagito, ergo sum. Alright, I'm just going to have to start banning people for, like, cage puns. Following thinkers such as Kickscher, Allen and Beckhoff, and Neander, we explicate design in terms of selection history. In our view, what it is to be, say, male is to have a bodily part or process that has the proximal or distal function of producing sperm. Okay, so here's their entire paper. Like, it, good on them for, you know, spitting it out right here. They say we explicate design in terms of selection history. Now, why is that okay? It probably not. To do this way, it's going to be cherry picking what history counts. So what is it to be, say, male is to have a body part or process that has the proximal or distal function of producing sperm. And so, like, you're going to have a process that does it. Of course, you're going to have people who have multiple sex organs, and so they're going to be both male and female. And then it's like, well, how do you actually select what counts as the process is going to be arbitrary and ad hoc. So I can tell you right now, that's like, they're not gonna, like, that's just not gonna be solvable. Like, I don't think so, but we're gonna find out what they say, because it's not that clever, and so they'll probably have something to say against it. All right. A handful of theorists have suggested in a rather vague or passing way that one might define sex in terms of function, design, or other teleological considerations. Bogardus, in a footnote, notes that the standard biological definition of sex in terms of anosogamy could import teleological notions of proper function to help us make sense of the possibility of an infertile female or male animal. Garson writes, what makes an individual female or male depends on what sort of sex cells, gametes they are designed to produce, egg or sperm. Yet these earlier works fail to develop such a view rigorously, defend it from obvious objections, or work out its potential implications for important scientific and social problems. Alright, so immediately, we've just got out of the realm of animal sex. What is the social problem that has to do with animals? So they are clearly weighing in on humans right here. Because what's the social problem that like animals have? Like, tell me. I have no idea. Hey, Valpo, what's up? Yeah, Bogardus is in the... I've read stuff by Bogardus, actually, before. This is philosophy of biology. So, yeah, hey, Valpo, welcome in. Hope things are well. Hope classes are not killing you. Vipers, hey, welcome in, Vipers. Your definition of sex is 404 not found. So you are a busted web page, as you identify as a busted web page. That's good to know. Maddie says some animals have culture or societies. That's fair. Like primates and ants too, but like, what's the social problems? Like, are we actually getting into the social problems of the animal societies that are going to get solved by this? I kind of don't think so, but you might be right. You might be right. Yeah, Vipers, welcome in. Valpo, welcome in. I hope y'all are well. But yeah, I'm just thinking this has obvious implications for like people. And so I'm wondering if we're going to get any of that. All right. Authors say before setting out our view, we hasten to add a few qualifications. First, we do not make the manifestly false claim that all individuals that belong to a sexually reproducing species are either exclusively male or exclusively female. Okay, so they're immediately saying we can do hermaphrodites and intersex and all these things. All right, there are hermaphroditic animals, both simultaneous, having both sexes at once, and sequential, changing sex over the course of one's lifetime. The claim that sex can be understood in terms of anisogamy does not commit one to the view that animal sexes are binary in this way. As we will discuss in section 5, we do not believe that sex is binary in Homo sapiens. Okay, so this is exactly where we were going. It's like they're going to define male and female, but then they're going to say that does not matter because it's not exactly binary. You can see this is just how we're going to define male and define female in a way that's understandable, but then you have to look at actually how it's playing out in practice. Error 500. Oh, man, I don't remember my error codes. You'll have to remind me what error 500 is, but yes. Yeah, and where's the teapot one? Isn't there a teapot error code? So you could identify as a teapot then. Like error like 413 or something. Internal server error. That's right. Error 500, internal server error. Blue dick of death. Okay. So yeah, this is their. I just want to say this is the duck out. They're not saying anything They don't want to be looking like saying anything controversial here. They're just trying to make very useful definitions for talking about other stuff, and so they're not going to be controversial, or they're not going to be as controversial as they could be. You should have figured out the rating level of the stream first. If you don't notice, I'm cursing pretty regularly, and I think it's set to. Oh, I'm sure I set it to 18 plus. So. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I always have mature audiences flagged. I generally do not describe this as a safe space. This is a hostile space. Granted, I am hostile to most of the things that safe space people are trying to be safe from. So I'm like anti all the I'm pretty far onto the woke side of things. So I'm I'm actively hostile to all the things that other people are would consider like bad wokeness. But yeah, there was a teapot or April Fool's joke. Okay, yeah. But yeah. No, and like this is not the Shane McInnes trying to keep this for the, trying to keep it polite for people who watch this with their kids. If you are watching a philosophy stream with someone under the 18, I have talked about rape, war crimes, and like all sorts of other like sort of like people abusing other people, because that's what happens when you talk about ethics a lot of times. So I suggest that you all don't do that and leave now. It's just bad. And have a wonderful night. Thank you for being here. Appreciate you stopping by. How did we get in? I don't know. What do you mean? Ivan. Yeah, so like I said, everyone should either go hang out with me here and lurk Ann, or go hang out with Ann and lurk here. So we're not mature. Oh well, I don't care if you're mature. You just have to be over 18, and if you are not, you keep that to yourself, because the site Twitch is you have to be at least 13, and you have to be at least 18 for the stream. So if you're going to say anything like that, you will get banned. Like, that's site rules. So yeah. That's fair, Vipers. That Vipers is a mod, and that's all you should know about the intended audience. Like, Vipers can ban you if Vipers sees fit. I don't see Vipers actually doing that, but it's up to Vipers. They're a mod, and you have to respect mods here on Twitch. So, and I can tell you right now, me and Vipers do not agree on all topics. Like, but that's okay. I think Vipers is a well, Vipers has the mod badge. I'll just put it that way. That's it. Okay, so where were we? And, feel free to keep asking questions if you wish, but I'm going to try to keep reading a little bit here. All right, so they just ducked out of everything in this spot right here. This is the duck out saying, we're not actually trying to do anything bad. We're just trying to make good definitions for further study. Second, our main intention is to offer a theoretical definition of sex. That's the whole point here. Like, water is H2O. I am not a compatibilist. I fucking hate compatibilism. I think it's a giant duck out. My position, golden, is that determinism is wrong. I think determinism is ludicrous. I don't think there is any argument that can end in therefore determinism is true. And because of that, I think you yeah, I know other people. Compatibilism says, look, we think that science is governing laws, that there are governing laws that tell us how the universe runs, and they are deterministic. They determine specifically how things happen. And so basically that means that the world, if you know it at time t, at the next moment of time, t plus 1, then if you know the state of the world and the laws, you can just run the world forward and find out what the next state of the universe is. Now, compatibilism says, well, what about free will? Free will basically says that, well, we still have choice. And so choice is still somehow compatible with the laws of nature. Maybe the laws of nature don't apply in certain spots. I mean, like, just with what we're doing, or they have their limits or something. And so there is some way that we can be compatible, like free will and what it is to be human has meaning even within a deterministic world. And that's why it's compatible, because apparently if the world was just like running on like a clock, it wouldn't really matter what we were doing, because it's already defined by the previous state of the world, which of course existed before any people did. So yeah, I know I am in the minority here. If you all have to leave because I'm anti-determinism, then I understand, but like it'd be strange hill to die on in that case. But yeah, so this is Maddie, it's one of these things you get to if you're looking at if you're interested in the ethics of what's it called, personal responsibility, or you're in philosophy of science, or you're looking at science. The scientists tend to think the world is determined, and my approach for denying determinism is argument theoretic. This is why I'm a very unusual person. I'm usually a very argument-based person. I can't, and I don't think any possible argument exists that is not dogmatic. You can have dogmatic arguments that end in the conclusion that determinism is true. There is no inductive, deductive, or even abductive. Well, you could always do abductive, but it would be just crappy. Argument that can end in determinism being the case. Of course, if you have it built into the way you already structure your world, that's dogmatic, and then of course you can have determinism, but then you haven't really argued for it, and you just do it. Ivan Neo says, I think incompatibilism is rejection of the world that is some combination of determined plus random. Libertarians think there's a third option. Yeah, so there's another way of saying it. I think that's one of the main positions, is what Ivan Neo just said. So you think there's a third option between like the determined and not determined worlds. Golden says, so there are no deterministic possible worlds. You can have some restricted possible worlds where you define them as determined, but I don't think that's the actual world. You can make some like as restrictions on. Of course, you can do it, Golden. But I don't think it's the actual world. So like this world is not that world, but of course you can define them. So.
Your position, I would say yes.
This is the best of all deterministic possible worlds. Okay, there. Sabine, yes, I've been following her blog forever. Yeah, Sabine Hossenfelder is a science blogger and physicist, and she's I think she's pretty competent actually. Ivan Neo asks, so yeah, thank you, Vipers, for bringing Sabine up. I think she's smart. Ivan Neo says, do you think there's a third option, or do you think that which is not determined is random? No, I don't like determinism at all. I don't actually care what happens, like that if it's not determined, it's random. I just don't like determinism. Like I said, my position is argument theoretic. And so it doesn't mean that I'm defaulting into like these standard categories. It means I deny the existence of a deterministic world, but I'm not sure if I have a fixed position beyond that. I've been thinking about it. People have been asking me recently, like it comes up more in chat, so people are interested in things. But I think some things are determined, right? I'm sure you can do some things determined. Like I said, in like limited areas, like determinism works, but I think that's not the, like, I don't think that's the nature of the world itself. But I think, in restricted domains, you can have things that are determined, but that's not how I think the universe is on the whole. So, you are not the first person to suggest I read Candide, Maddie. I have not read it though, but you're not the first to suggest it. I hope my audio is more lined up with my mouth. I can't tell. We'll see. I busted my setup a little bit not that long ago, and my frames per second are just annoying me at this point too. I didn't think it was long, but yeah, I should read it. Ivan Neo says, I am agnostic on whether the world is fully deterministic, but whatever isn't determined is fundamentally random. All other notions are deductively inconsistent. Okay, I mean, again, my positions are informed by argument theoretic positions that I have, like my argument theoretic understanding of the world, which is not what other people base on. And I also have a very loose, well, not loose, but I have a very non-classical version of logic too. So like I am very permissive in my logics. So there's a lot of things that can happen. Like I understand way too much about, I've been hanging around with very like non-classical logicians, so I've seen all sorts of weird things happen with logic. And so it's like deductive inconsistency is like not a problem. Like that can be patched up sometimes even. So yeah, but like, yeah, I understand. Like these are ways people deal with it. Like you say, okay, it's random or something, and that does work. Magicians or logicians, yeah, some of them there's overlap. All right. Yeah. So the author's main intention is to offer a theoretical definition of sex, like water is H2O, that explicates the simpler notions biologists have of anosogamy rather than a descriptive or ameliorative analysis. We want to know the actual referent of sex when used in biological context in our world. We don't believe that our definition is suitable as a general descriptive analysis of sex, given that many people in the world do not know what anosogamy is, and given that we are slightly revising the biologist's ordinary concept. Nevertheless, we do think obtaining a clear theoretical definition of sex is a good starting point for those who wish to pursue ameliorative projects, especially given their commitment to descriptive accuracy. Yeah, and so they're referencing Novaes 2020, so that'd be Catherine Dutil Novaes, who's also in this area, and I think we may have read something. We've read stuff by her, I think, on stream before. Yeah. Third, questions about what sex a person is must be divorced sharply from questions about what benefits, rights, and privileges they should have in society. We think biological theories are shaped by evidentiary considerations, but because of how science is embedded in social context, we have to think carefully about social uptake. We think that reflection on biology is consistent with progressive social politics. This has real implications for marginalized groups. Attempts to recruit biology to disenfranchise trans people who have gender identities different from their assigned sex are not supported by biology. Yeah, so I mean they're on the pretty like left not left wing side, but they're trying to keep the gender and sex separate here. So gender identities are not identical to sex. Gender identities are your mental states that tell you how to feel about the world. So you may feel one way or another about the world, like you may have like the mind of a woman or whatever, but like your body of a man, and then you try to work that out. But like that's different. So you've got identities, and then you've got the biology. And I know people disagree with this, but this is what they're saying here. Okay, fourth and finally, the question of what male and female are is quite different from the question of defining the terms woman and man. We don't take a stand on the latter question here, though we're sympathetic to the contextualist view advanced by Jennifer Saul, I shouldn't call her Jennifer Saul, and to intersectional approaches advanced by trans feminists. We do, however, believe it is imperative to respect every person's first-person authority over their identity, and that people should use gender terms on the basis of consent. Yeah, so they're basically saying they are trying to find a useful definition for the biological science, but once you get beyond the biological science, they're making no claims whatsoever. Basically, they're saying that's not our problem. The social stuff is separate. But, the whole thing here, they're going to make claims and people are going to use it one way or the other. So these are all hand-waving, please don't murder us if someone uses this theory against in like a social way for people. Okay. 2. Some alternative accounts of sex. Here we briefly describe 3 alternative biological accounts of sex and show where our view parts with them. Franklin Hall. This is Laura Franklin Hall. I've actually gone to hear Laura Franklin Hall speak. She was at Columbia. I don't know if she still is here in New York. Laura Franklin Hall's account of sex is rather complex. She thinks that the sex of an animal is only indirectly linked to their gamete size. Oh wait, who is this? This is Rosalind Franklin. Oh, okay, there we go. Is that actually what Rosalind Franklin looks like? I do not know if I knew if that was what Rosalind Franklin looked like, but that's cool. Nice emote, Ivan Neo. Yeah, and this is not Rosalind Franklin. Actually, I have no idea if they're related, but yes. So Liz Laura Franklin Hall, I'm pretty sure, who's a philosopher of biology. She thinks that the sex of an animal is only indirectly linked to gamete size. What makes an individual male, say, is not that it produces small gametes. It has to do with the fact that its reproductive traits, say its testes, are the outcome of a certain developmental process. That's what Midjourney thinks she looks like. Oh, okay. So that means it's some sort of amalgam of what other people have posted on the internet about Rosalind Franklin. So I wonder if that has anything at all to do with reality or it's just fictionalized versions of it. That's interesting. Okay. Specifically for an animal to be male, the developmental process that causes it to have male reproductive organs, sometimes called the Wolffian pathway, must be a direct lineal descent of the very ancient developmental process that took place in our earliest sperm-producing ancestors. The core benefit of the view is that it restores a certain amount of explanatory power to animal sexes. When I designate an animal as female, I am pointing to a developmental process that gives rise to a number of coordinated and sex-typical characteristics. One aspect of Franklin Hall's view is that we largely endorse spit on my screen. One aspect of Franklin Hall's view that we largely endorse is that sexes are historical. To say that a property is historical just means that to possess that property, an individual must have the right history. So we're linking the biology to the history here, okay? So like an individual must have the right history. So again, like you can't, this is why it's not gender. You're not saying I have like, you're saying if you have a history, you have this sort of biology. Okay, it's not that you can say, okay, I'm now a different race because I feel like being it. That then you have the wrong history, and you'll see this claim that the history matters in different places. Okay, the property does not entirely supervene on current day causal powers. Being a sibling or being an adaptation are historical properties. Being male or being female is also a historical property. Okay. In our view, design is an intrinsically historical notion. What it is for an organism to be designed to produce eggs rather than sperm is to possess a part or process the biological function of which is to produce eggs or sperm. Whether or not a bodily part or process has the biological function of producing eggs or sperm is determined by selection history, a point we will elaborate in section 3. All right, so this is again saying, look, they want to talk about how do you get to have sperm, or how does a person get to have eggs. It's part of the process there, and that involves a historical notion too. So that's an interesting way to go about it. We'll see what they have to say, because again, you're picking and choosing your history, and I think I criticized this right from the get-go. Like, if you have to cherry pick certain histories. Now, is that a problem here? Maybe not, but you're still cherry picking a history. Okay. One difference between Franklin Hall's view and ours is that we do not tie one's sex quite as directly to ancient evolutionary history as she does. In our reading, the notion of design is more flexible. Design can refer not only to the products of evolutionary natural selection, but also to the things that human beings make and produce, or more generally, the ways that we transform the living or non-living world. For example, someone who plays Tetris every day is literally, through the process of trial and error, redesigning parts of their brain to be good at Tetris. As we will explain in section 5, our view leaves open the theoretical possibility that a human being might literally change their sex by virtue of the intentional design modifications they make to their bodies. Okay, so they're for transhumanism right here. So this is interesting. Yeah. I know, this really just pushed it here. Okay, so there are histories that matter, and they are saying it is arbitrary which ones that they can pick if they somehow end up in the end point of having sperm or eggs, and that is how you know if it's a male or a female. And so Tetris, yes, and I think Frank Big Time is a Tetris player. So sorry if you're not, but I think that's where Frank is also part of the Tetris community. And hi from all my Tetris friends if you guys are watching, because I'm a Minesweeper player, ex-Minesweeper player, maybe, kind of. I still play, but not. I'm not so fast anymore. But I'm allied with the Tetris community, and the Minesweeper community here on Twitch we're friends. So what they're saying here, Maddie, is that you can change yourself by what you do, which is not that crazy of a thing. So this is sort of the Lamarckian theory that by what you do, you can change yourself, and that so you could actually change yourself in some small way, maybe even to change your sex. And so, like, if you could, take on some things that would make you have sperm, which might be something we could do in the future, that, like, you could, instead of making eggs, you could make sperm in the future by, undergoing certain transformations. Like, maybe there'll be, like, some sort of stem cell thing that could do this. Well, the point, Maddie, is Tetris, is that you can modify yourself to get better at Tetris. You can practice a lot, and then you're good at Tetris. So you have gotten good at Tetris. What does that do to you? You are changing your brain to get good at Tetris. One of the things, and you'll actually, if you look up, Maddie, Tetris on Twitch, is that there's it's a random example, but there's something called the Tetris effect. And this is the name of one of the major distributions of Tetris right now. It's called Tetris Effect Connected, is I think the latest version. And so you will see people playing Tetris Effect Connected right here, where people who play Tetris a lot will literally start to see Tetris blocks in their everyday life because they stare at it so much that, like, the rest of their world starts appearing like Tetris blocks. So I wouldn't even be surprised if, like, because these people who are writing this are using Tetris in this way, that maybe they play Tetris enough that they actually start to see Tetris blocks and see their problems, like arranging things in their cabinets, as like Tetris. Yeah, that's right, Maddie. When you work on Excel too much, you start seeing cells in real life. Yeah, or not in like other places where you shouldn't be. And so this is what they're talking about. You're actually rearranging your world in terms of something you're doing to yourself. And yes, Tetris is a weird example maybe for this exact spot, but this is the whole point. You can Google Tetris Effect. There's a Wikipedia article on it, and you can watch people playing Tetris Effect right now on Twitch. And so Borderlands 2 also. See, that's funny. Like, yeah, I don't remember if I ever saw Minesweeper boxes, but like I definitely started dreaming about Minesweeper numbers and stuff at one point. So intentional design modifications can change your bodies, and therefore they're also going to argue possibly change your sex. Viper says, I get that. I often find it hard to articulate because my thoughts are, well, a web of hyperlinks, not a linear structure. Yeah, but like this is exactly the thing. And so it's worth looking at the Wikipedia article for Tetris Effect because it describes this sort of stuff. Like how you start to put stuff together as if it were a video game construction. But yeah, I just find it like funny. We may actually have people in the Tetris community here that can speak to this. I mean, I can talk about Minesweeper and clearly this sort of thing. Viper says, you can tell the authors aren't British because the paper is entitled Sex by Design and not The Dog's Bollocks. No, these are definitely like American English. Okay, Maddie's saying that just feels too simplified for a complex situation. That's all fair. You don't have to love this example. Again, they're not making. Maybe this is not the best example for right here, but it's not a very big point either. They're going to talk about it in section 5. They said they're coming back to this. So, and it would be funny if when we come back to this later on in the paper, if like it's basically they do talk about something like the Tetris effect, which is a known effect that you can talk about where people have modified their brains to see the world differently. And in that case, it might actually be an interesting example because it's a known phenomenon from video game players where you can do this. But like that's it. Like that'd be the only real good way of expanding on it. But I don't know if they are, but it'd be interesting if that's where they go. The only good way I can think of right now. I don't want to say it's the only way. Section 5 is where they have the Tetris song MIDI to automatically start playing. Bam, 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 bam. Yeah. So. Okay. Another difference between Franklin Hall's view and ours worth highlighting is that we do not think the animal sexes lack any intrinsic synchronic properties. Following Khalidi, we think appealing to historical and intrinsic properties better explains the causal origin of biological kinds and the developmental trajectory of their members. In our view, part of what makes an organism male is that it presently has parts or processes with the function of producing ova or sperm. These parts and processes are intrinsic synchronic properties of males and females that ordinarily realize these functions. But the presence of these intrinsic properties in males and females and the specific function they realize is ultimately to be explained by a causal historical process of some kind. Hence, we think including synchronic intrinsic properties in our ontology of sex, in addition to historical properties, is important for explaining both the phylogenetic origin and ontogenetic development of the animal sexes as we understand them. Excuse me, sorry. Yeah. Thank you, Vipers. That said, we don't think males and females are best identified by the specific intrinsic microstructural properties that realize their reproductive functions or by the specific phenotypical properties those functions yield. Rather, like other functional kinds, we think the animal sexes are best identified by having the function to produce eggs or sperm. So they're talking about the very local history. Do you have the stuff that might produce sperm or eggs, or do you have stuff that do you have that stuff that might have done that at some point and you can take that on or get rid of it, but you have to have it. It has to be a part of you in some sense. It's not like that you historically had it. You did have to have it. Okay. Griffiths, as we noted, initially defined sex in terms of the ability to produce certain kinds of gametes. Males produce small gametes and females produce large gametes. He then points out that, on this definition, not all individuals within a sexually reproducing species will have a sex. For example, he suggested that sterile worker bees are not really female since their genomes are designed to terminate over a development before they can reproduce. As he puts it, there is a human imperative to give everything a sex, but biology doesn't share it. Biology admits some gaps or lacunae, and we just need to get comfortable with that. We think, the authors think, this account takes a more questionable turn when he applies the same lesson to juvenile organisms and postmenopausal females. That suggests that he does not think, say, a male infant is really male or a postmenopausal female is really female. Are these just more examples of the same sort of gaps and lacunae that the biological world admits? This conclusion, we think, violates the ordinary biological usage of sex, the very usage it seeks to explicate. Yeah. He briefly suggests an amendment to his original theory to avoid these problematic implications. Yes, that is the way you say we disagree strongly. But again, you have to be... Let me, again, just take a small step back from this paper and talk about writing philosophy. You don't ever, and I mean like unless you really, really, really fucking know what you're doing, call someone out hard. Because I've seen people do it and I've seen it go wrong for them. Because they called someone out hard and then the other person came back and like punched back even harder. And like it made them look like real assholes. So the real thing here is this is the very usage it seeks to explicate. This is the very usage they seek to explicate. That is these authors. And so this may be a little strong, because this is what their definition is, not his definition is. And so you got to be careful when writing this sort of stuff, because Griffiths could say, no, you guys are overstepping. I'm using it in this restricted way, and like that's okay. But like this is not, it may not be the usage that he seeks to explicate. It's the usage these authors seek to explicate. But that's begging the question on these authors. For these authors to say that what they mean is what Griffiths means. So, but yeah, but you're right, Maddie. It was calling someone out. But I just want to remind people when writing philosophy, you got to remember some of these people really aren't stupid. They know what they're doing, and it's like calling them out is dangerous. Okay. Griffiths briefly suggests an amendment to his original theory to avoid these problematic implications. Instead of one's sex being determined exclusively by the ability to make certain gametes, he suggests that it can also be determined by the fact that one will grow into an individual who is able to make certain kinds of gametes. Ivan Neo says that was one of Shaw's. Wait, what is that from? I don't know. Okay, let me know. Alright, so, quote, after fertilization, therefore, we can say that an individual mammal or bird has a sex in the sense that it has started to grow the ability to produce either male or female gametes. End quote. We imagine that he could, by a similar maneuver, avoid the implausible consequence that postmenopausal females are not really female. A postmenopausal female has a sex in that it once possessed the ability to produce gametes. Oh, Monty Python, Oscar Wilde sketch? Okay, I am not up on my Monty Python. Okay, yet his view would still have the dubious consequence that an individual who is infertile for their entire life does not have a sex. Yeah, I mean that would be hard, but you could expand on what this ability means. Where is this? Yeah, possessing the ability can be expanded very widely. And so this is the problem. There are ways out for Griffiths here on the how you understand the word ability. Like even if something else is blocking it, you could have had the ability if like one more thing was fixed, and then you could like wishy-washy that. But again, these authors may have a point here. I just don't know. I'm just saying there's always ways. Like this author doesn't seem so far away from them, and so it could be fixed. But you know, maybe that's why the authors are writing this paper, is because the other Griffiths did not fix it, and so they're coming in with their proposal now. Author's view does not face any of these implausible consequences. On our view, a prepubescent male animal is male not because it will grow up to produce sperm, but because its body is designed to produce sperm. See again, right here, What was the ability? It was designed to produce sperm. So here's the thing. What is actually going on here? Is there really any difference between these two claims? I don't know. Okay, authors also believe that postmenopausal females are female by virtue of the fact that their bodies are designed to produce eggs. We will return to this central point in section 3 below, where we introduce a specific naturalistic account of what it is for one's body to be designed to produce eggs or sperm. By naturalistic, we just mean one that only deploys concepts and constructs that have a respected role within the contemporary natural sciences. Okay, and so here's the teleological metaphysics. They're saying only scientific views count when we're talking about naturalistic design. But okay. But again, what does possessing the ability versus designed to do something actually mean? Is there really a difference there? I don't know. But the authors think that it's important. So they'll have to clarify, though, because right now it's just a terminology to me. Okay, so Fausto, Sterling, and Richardson. A third approach is Fausto Sterling's pluralistic approach. As noted above, Fausto Sterling despairs of finding any core biological trait that all and only male animals share, and another that all and only female animals share. Instead, to acknowledge the diversity and variety of manifestations of sex, she recommends decomposing sex into different variables such as hormonal sex, genital sex, and gonadal sex, which can be combined in different ways in different individuals. And our view is that despite the plurality of indicators that scientists use to infer what sex an organism is, there is a non-trivial overarching phenomenon that biologists in different research domains are tracking together. We think the various aspects of sex Fausto Sterling identifies genital sex, hormonal sex, and gonadal sex are best seen as empirical and defeasible indicators of that overarching phenomenon. We agree entirely with her, however, that the sex of an individual is not always determined by their genes, but by epigenetic factors as well. For example, the sex of alligators is determined by incubation temperature rather than sex chromosomes. So nothing in our conception of sex implies the simplistic genetic reductionism that she rightly rejects. Viper says regarding sex, they say those who talk about it most do it the least, and here we are. You are all on Twitch, and it's like, this is the old joke, I think, from XQC, that people were calling him a nerd, and he was a dork, and he's like, you're the one watching me. So it's like, yes, it's like, here we are, exactly right, Vipers. So, that's right. Richardson 2022 takes a slightly different approach from Fausto Sterling in that she moves away somewhat from the metaphysics of sex into an examination of how sex is operationalized differently in different scientific contexts. As she describes it, sex contextualism is the view that the definition of sex and sex-related variables and whether they are relevant in biomedical research depends on the research context. For example, a group of researchers studying infertility is going to operationalize sex differently than a group of researchers studying the genetics of sexual differentiation. Maddie says, quote, I spent my childhood trying to stop people calling me a nerd, and now I gotta fight people to accept me as one. Yeah. I don't know what that's from, but like nerd has become, I guess it's less of an insult now, or taken less as it. It's like, all right, it's people who like stuff, like you geek out over things, and like that's a good thing. So, yeah. Oh, it's from you. There you go. Well, you're quoting yourself. All right, there you are. Viper says, I just realized I have 25,000 points. I could put you in the hospital with water intoxication if you wanted. Yeah, it doesn't, Vipers. No one actually specified how much I have to drink. So, you're right. There is no cooldown on that, though. I can take a very small sip every time. All right, so authors agree entirely with Richardson that sex must be operationalized differently in different research contexts, but we don't believe that this indicates that sex itself is ambiguous any more than the fact that we can operationalize length in various ways implies that the term length is ambiguous. Ivan Neo says, my high school physics teacher was the inspiration for the writers of Revenge of the Nerds. That's amazing. That's very impressive. Hopefully not the sexual assault part. Yeah, that would be scary. But okay. Yeah, assault is bad. All right, so 3. So these were the people they disagreed with. Again, I'm not 100% sure they're going to be able to get away from all these other theories, but we'll find out. Like, because it looks like their theory really is not that far away. But and I fear still that they're just defining themselves. They're just being dogmatic and saying, look, we can define it this way and it's good this way, but like the other stuff is still gonna work. So yeah, we'll see. Like, you can maybe break everything down the way they say. The question is, why would you want to? And that's right here. What they just said is people are going to have to do other things than what we were saying here because it's going to matter to them what they're working on, not what we're working on. So again, what's the grand upshot of this paper then? If, like, yeah, what they say works, but it only works when you're looking at it in a certain context. I don't know. 3. Sex, design, and biological function. On our view, the sex of an individual does not depend on disposition, but design. What makes an individual male is not that it has the capacity or disposition to produce sperm, but that it is designed to produce sperm. We realize that design is often used metaphorically. The question then is how to cash out this notion of design in naturalistic, non-mysterious terms. The most obvious way to understand what it is for an individual to be designed to produce sperm in terms of the possession of parts or processes, the biological function of which is to produce sperm. I mean, yes, but this is just by definition. This is not actually helpful. This is just a definition of stuff. Having testes is a way of possessing a part that has the proximal biological function of producing sperm. Having an active copy of the SRY gene is another way of possessing a part that has the distal biological function of producing sperm. So, having an active copy of the SRY gene is a sufficient condition for being male, but it is not necessary. Okay. Putting the account as concisely as possible, we suggest the following, taking X to be an individual animal. So, X is female if and only if X, that animal, has biological parts or processes that have the proximal or distal biological function of producing eggs, and likewise for sperm and being male. So, yeah, if you have the parts or processes that, result somehow in producing sperm, or you could produce sperm, then you're male. And if you could produce eggs in some way, in some world where like everything's working correctly, to do that, then you're female to make eggs. Of course, nothing in our account precludes sequential hermaphrodism, an animal changing its sex over the course of its life, or simultaneous hermaphrodism, an animal having both sexes at once. Moreover, by producing eggs, we refer to the ovary's function of maturing eggs from the oocyte to the ovum stage, not to the initial fetal production of oocytes. Obviously, the plausibility of our definition requires an equally plausible notion of biological function. Taking our cue once more from the idea of design, we think that function is an essentially historical property. Specifically, we understand it in terms of selection history. We think an individual is male if and only if that individual has a biological part or process that was recently selected for producing sperm. Okay, so an individual is male if if that part was recently selected for producing sperm by evolutionary natural selection or some comparable selection process. We are open-minded about the prospect of defining sex in terms of function, but are using some other notion of function instead, such as a goal contribution or causal role account. We think, however, that trying to define sex by using an ahistorical notion of function faces special challenges. Okay. So they're defining male in terms of producing sperm, and then it also needs the historical necessity of trying to get to sperm, whatever that is, in some historical way. Yeah, that's right, Golden. This account theoretically allows for sexless animals. But you gotta realize there's a lot of animals that are just like asexually reproducing. Like, all the sort of like single-celled organisms are like asexually reproducing. And so that would be fine. There's plenty of sexless animals or organisms. So that won't be a problem for them because they're only talking about ones that have sperm and eggs. And those are the only ones they care about. Now, the real problem here is, are they just defining themselves into the only, like, they're only talking about what they want to talk about and then saying everything else doesn't count here. And that's kind of like that's what's going to happen. They're defining things the way they want, and then everything else doesn't count. Now, is that right? Are they actually capturing all the animals? And so Golden's asking, like, is this really what you want to be talking about? Is this actually everything we want to talk about? I don't know. And this could be a problem for them. So it's just like they're saying, oh no, we're not talking about any of those other things. It's like, well, why is that okay? Maybe you want to talk about those other things. Okay, so what is the problem with using ahistorical notions? In particular, the selected effects theory permits a strict separation between what it is for a trait to have a function and what it is for a trait to be able to perform that function. Okay, so they don't care about a busted person who can't produce sperm because of like some weird like genetic, some weird problem with their genetics. What's a crappy criticism, Vipers? I mean, defining yourself out of a problem happens all the time in philosophy, and it's not a crappy criticism. People do this all the time. It's like okay, look, I'm just talking about my little narrow slice of the world, and you can't tell me about anything else. It's like, that's a good criticism if like what you're saying is like, well, it only works in a very limited sense. It's like, well, you're not saying anything important in that case. So that is not always a crappy criticism. It depends. It might be. It depends on how small they're. It depends on the size of their claim versus what they're actually talking about. If they're making some giant claim about some very small slice, you're saying, okay, it ignores the fact that language is inherently imprecise. It depends on the usage here, and that's fair. But like, it just depends on the usage at the moment of what sort of like claims they're making, and we have to find out. So, but yeah, it can be a good criticism depending if they're making a very like strong claim, but then they say, well, it only applies to a very small amount of the world. It's like, you didn't say anything then. It's like, yeah, it's like you might have a point, but it's a minor point. Okay, so for the concept of function to expand the inclusion criterion for maleness or femaleness beyond the mere capacity to produce sperm or eggs, its definition must allow for the possibility that something can have a function yet fail to perform that function. Goal, contribution, and causal role accounts because of the way that they tie the possession of a function to the ability to perform a function are somewhat more problematic on this account, though we don't wish to discuss to discount such views entirely. We also think that a historical notion of function allows us to draw principal distinctions between parts and processes that merely enable versus realize. I don't know what this means. That merely enable. I don't know what the sentence means. Versus realize the function in question. Okay. Oh, merely enable versus realize the function in question. Okay, yeah, so if something enables versus so you might be able to enable sperm production, but you do not realize it. So something is blocking it. Ivan Neo says, our brain uses neural networks, use many data points to classify things. We can try to devise a dictionary definition of an organic concept, but will not tolerate special cases. That's fair. No, absolutely. Because the question is, like, if you are literally saying what it is that we are doing is only these things, and then you were discounting everything else, it's like, well, is that really the phenomenon we want to talk about? Viper says, meh, all language is about creating stereotypical definition, but can't fully encapsulate with mouth sounds or scribbles. Yeah, again, completely agree most with like what we're talking about here, but in this case, it doesn't encapsulate reality. I got you. But in this case, it depends what are they actually talking about here. Like, it may not be as wishy-washy as you guys are making it say, like, well, we're talking with imprecise language. Yeah, but that doesn't mean that's what they were saying. These people may be defining themselves out of the problem. It's like, you can say, well, everything I do is like never contradictory. If I contradict myself, you've misunderstood me. It's like, nah, you don't get to claim that you are never inconsistent. Like, you can define yourself out of the problem, like, in that everyone else has misunderstood you. No. I can contradict myself, and that's a problem for me when I'm trying not to be contradictory. But if I define myself as always being consistent, and y'all are wrong, it's like, you guys should push back on me and be like, no gray, whatever the fuck you call yourself, you're an idiot and you're saying stupid things. Like, call me out. But like, that's not a definition problem. Like, that's like, I'm trying to protect myself with the definition, but like that's not a healthy use of defining things. So again, it's a question of implementation here. So it's like, if I'm talking nonsense, call me out. But like, I can't say, well, then you didn't understand. Yeah, well, that's the thing. Vipers. It's like, I think you're not, like, the question of like what they were doing was bad. Or it could potentially be bad. And I want you to understand why. Like I said, I'm argument theoretic here. That's where I come from. That's what I think about. It's like, it's not bad yet, but it could be. It's like, you can't define yourself into always being right. Like the streamer's always correct. Is that really, like, I can define myself, and if I'm not correct, like, is that really, does that make sense? That's, I agree, Ivan. If like something's not ticking you off, then like, what are you really doing? You're just, reading for pleasure or something. That's not philosophy most of the time. Okay, for example, while the heart enables the production of sperm, it lacks the distal function to produce sperm because it was not selected for it in our evolutionary history. It's an open question of whether other notions of function can plausibly make this distinction, and we are similarly open to that possibility. Okay. Again, this is very cherry picky. Like, how do we know what the history of the evolution of the heart was? But like, plausibly the heart wasn't used in the selection of sperm, but we don't actually know that. But again, that's their example here. And so this was one of my concerns from above. How do you actually pick histories? How do you choose that history? It's kind of difficult. And so this is the start of this is the first example where they're claiming something, but as soon as you ask, well, how do you know that the heart lacks the distal function to produce sperm because it was not selected for it in our evolutionary history? Well, how do you actually know our evolutionary history? I mean, you're that right here. How do you know it? You don't know. Like, you weren't there the whole time. So, I mean, I agree with them, but like making that as if they know it is not that's a just so story. All right. Anywho, let's consider 3 examples of how our approach to sex deals with our problematic cases. Example 1. Suppose a male animal has undescended testicles, which causes it to be infertile for life. In this case, this individual is still male because it has a biological part or process, the testes, that has the proximal biological function of producing sperm. Okay, example 2. What if a female animal has her ovaries removed? Then it would seem that it lacks a part or process that has the proximal biological function of producing eggs. In this case, however, since it still has, say, hypothalamic estrogen receptors, then it has a biological part or processes that has the distal biological function of producing eggs. Example 3. What about postmenopausal female mammals? Much of the same can be said here. On our account of function, the ovaries, by virtue of their selection history, possess the function of producing eggs. As we will argue in the next section, this is true even in postmenopausal females. The same can be said for the testes of juvenile males. Goldenese says, they know it was not selected, they can't know why, but I think it's fair enough to infer from function. Well, that's exactly what they're doing, Golden. It's fair enough, but it's a just so story. And the problem is, are they begging the question by doing that? Like, have you sort of already assumed what you're trying to show? And that's the sort of worry that when you can't know it, have you already assumed it for some other reason? And now, yeah, you do infer it, but does the function already, like, have you assumed it in the understanding of your function anyway? Viper says, sure, you can look at the tree of life, our best understanding of it, and determine when the heart and proto-heart first appeared. Yeah, this is exactly a thing. I agree what they're saying, but like, you're getting into subtleties here that is not so clear what exactly was selected for at any given point. Was it selected for, like, after, like, the testes did show up? Did the heart change in some way that was selected for them? Of course, I agree with what everybody's saying here. It's just, you've moved beyond the obvious, obvious truths into now this, you have to infer things. And once you start doing that, like I said, you got a problem. You might start begging the question, reading things we understand now back into the history. I'm not saying they're wrong. I'm just saying it's a different kind of argument and it's dangerous. It's getting more dangerous. So, where were we? Okay, we close this section by summarizing our 4 core virtues of our account of sex. The first and most obvious is that it respects ordinary biological usage while avoiding the problematic consequences of the simple starter theory. A second virtue of our view is that it shows how there can be numerous empirical indicators of sex that are not identical to sex, such as an individual's chromosomes, external genitals, or sex hormones. All of these are valid empirical indicators of what sex an individual is insofar as they constitute evidence of design. And this design is the evolutionary version of design here. On this view, we agree with Richardson that different research programs can and should operationalize sex in different ways, since there are many different empirical indicators of sex. Our view shows how recognizing the plurality of indicators of sex is consistent with sex being a single overarching phenomenon. Third, the claim that sex of an individual depends upon which gamete they are designed to produce coheres well with biological thought about the nature of the animal sexes. As we have noted, many theorists have sought to understand the sexes in terms of anisogamy. Moreover, teleological concepts such as design, purpose, and function have always played a major role in biology. See, right here, this is the funny thing. When they said that it hadn't recently been used, and now they're coming back to it because they need this idea that design, purpose, and function have always played a major role in biology. Despite attempts during the scientific revolution to expunge teleological concepts from biology, they have proven to be extremely stubborn. As a consequence, many thinkers have sought to deploy evolutionary reason to vindicate teleological concepts rather than to expunge them. Our view draws both of these themes together, design and anisogamy, into what we see as a compelling picture. Okay, it's like, have they found a nice way to describe this whole thing in some sort of like evolutionarily okay way? Again, are they picking and choosing the histories they want to make it seem okay with the evolution? Again, this is, I fear it's begging the question, but like it might be a good descriptive project for people who want to talk about sex in this way. This isn't a problem. I'm just saying it's like it's going to limit our understanding of like the future of different sexes if you are going to define them in terms of history, because you're always going to be stuck with the same categories basically here. But that's okay. Like this is what we want to be looking at, and so it's not really a problem that we're always looking at male and female in terms of sperm and eggs. But like you are basically buying that theory for a time immemorial at this point, if this is how you define your world. And that's what they're doing here. And that's okay, because it's a useful thing until we come up with something better maybe in the future. Okay. A final virtue of their account is that it does not attempt to specify the mechanistic details that make an individual male, female, or hermaphroditic. Ivanio says, I would agree with the author's assessment that their scheme is not the worst one out there. Yeah, I agree. This is not the worst one out there. I think it has its limitations, but that's okay. Everyone does. Their view is that as philosophers, we aren't the ones who should be specifying those details, scientists are. One way to appreciate our ambition in this paper is to consider the difference, which Ross brings into sharp relief, between mechanism and pathways. We think mechanisms are useful for thinking about individual species because they provide species-specific details about how a shared pathway is realized. In contrast, we view pathways as useful for thinking about multiple species because they home in on a shared process that occurs, albeit often in different ways, across all of them. Accordingly, our account need not specify the mechanistic details of how the males and females of each species actually produce sperm and eggs. It need only point out that the male and female pathways are widely shared, and that the shared pathway is explanatory. Yeah, and so the real question is, what do you mean by explanatory? It is explanatory, but exactly what do you mean by explanatory here? And that's really what I'm harping on. If anyone wants to make me clarify that, let me know. But this is really what I've been harping on the last few paragraphs. Okay. two objections. There are two main objections we want to respond to. The first was driven home to us by an anonymous reviewer. Is it truly the case that a body part or process, such as the ovaries or testes, retain their function throughout the entire lifetime of the individual? Isn't it more plausible to say that at menopause, the ovaries lose their function of producing eggs, or that at puberty, the testes gain their function of producing sperm? How many references does this paper have? All right, we are on page 10 of 18. A few pages. So we got 2 pages. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 30. Yeah, so like 35. Maybe 30 something. It's not like the craziest referenced thing, but like, you know, they had those like these major like they picked out some authors that they wanted to talk about and they talked about them. All right, at first we reasoned in the following way. According to the selected efforts theory of function, which we accept functions attach first and foremost to types of traits, not tokens of traits. It is first and foremost the type ovary that has the function of producing eggs because it is that type of trait that underwent a historical selection process. A token ovary has the function of producing eggs by virtue of its membership within the relevant type. As a consequence, any token ovary by virtue of its type membership will have the biological function of producing eggs. It seemed to us that the selective effects theory implies that as a rule, functions adhere to traits for the duration of an individual's life. But this line of reasoning is problematic. The mere fact that the function of a token trait is derived from the function of the type doesn't by itself imply that the token must possess one and the same function over the entirety of its existence. Couldn't a trait's function change over the course of one's lifetime? Consider the SOX9 gene. In very early embryonic development, activation of the gene supports neural migration. Around week 8 in human, it serves in males to promote testes development. Nothing in the selected effects theory forbids us from saying that a trait can gain or lose functions during its lifetime. Why then shouldn't we say that human ovaries have the function of producing eggs until menopause, at which point they lose that function? But if they lose their function, then we are back to the implication that postmenopausal human females, and we should add killer whales and short-finned pilot whales, are not really female. These considerations are strengthened when we observe that menopause itself may be a designed feature of the human body rather than a byproduct of senescence or a malfunction. Similar considerations could be raised for the testes of juvenile males. One might think that even if we accept that the ovaries of a postmenopausal female have lost the function of producing eggs, that alone wouldn't jeopardize that individual's status as female. That's because the individual still has other parts such as, the XX sex chromosomes. But of course, one might run the same argument for any bodily part or processes you choose. Why say that the sex chromosomes of a postmenopausal female still have the distal function of contributing to egg production? The claim that after menopause, the ovaries no longer have the function of producing eggs is supported by a second consideration. This has to do with charting the precise conditions under which the ovaries can be said to be dysfunctional or malfunctioning. Biomedical researchers generally only talk of disorders of ovary function when they stop producing eggs before menopause. After menopause, they're not thought of as dysfunctional. One way of explaining this asymmetry of judgment is to assume that at menopause the ovaries lose their function of producing eggs, hence no dysfunction either. By the same reasoning, the failure of a juvenile male to produce sperm is not considered a dysfunction, but only the failure of an adult male to produce sperm. That suggests that the juvenile male's testes don't actually have the function of producing sperm, but only come to acquire that function at puberty. The puzzle for the authors then is to see whether there's still some meaningful sense in which an individual's ovaries have the function of producing eggs or testes producing sperm throughout the entire lifetime of that individual, that is starting from the time of sex differentiation. We consider two solutions to the problem. Of these, we lean toward the second. Yeah, I know this is getting into the weeds now, so bear with me. The first is this. We might say that an organ like the testes has a set of time-indexed functions. We could say, for example, that the testes have the function of producing sperm from T1 puberty to T2 senescence. Then we would simply revise our definition of being male to say that X is male if and only if X has biological parts or processes that have the time-indexed proximal or distal biological function of producing sperm. So you just say, look, did the thing make the sperm when it was supposed to make the sperm? And that's it, not the whole lifetime. Okay, there's a second, simpler solution that they prefer. It draws on Neander's notion of a response function. Many biological parts and processes possess throughout life the function of performing a certain activity, but only in certain circumstances. The pineal gland has the function of releasing melatonin, but only in response to the dimming of light. The immune system has the function of releasing an army of white blood cells, but only in response to tissue damage. It's not that the pineal gland daily gains and loses its function of releasing melatonin. It always possesses a response function. Response functions are philosophically well understood and play an important role in biology and medicine. Exactly, Ivan. Yeah, we're back to the pineal gland and Descartes, or Nick Cage Descartes, I guess, at that point. We think response functions can help us make sense of the precise way in which an individual's testes have the function of producing sperm even before puberty. From the moment of their formation in the fetus, the testes have the following response function: to produce sperm in response to an extremely complex environmental trigger, which includes the uptake of certain hormones, such as follicle stimulating hormones. Yeah, I'll summon Joe Rogan. This is what you gotta pick. Some topics that might be more interest. You put sex in the title, and I bet I'd get more views today. But I don't update my stream titles. But I bet when it gets to YouTube, when it does have sex in the title, this will get more views. So be like, oh, sex, philosophy, exciting. Then they'll get here and realize I'm talking about philosophy of biology, and then they'll leave. But that's okay. I still get the view, or maybe whatever YouTube thinks of as 2 seconds of viewership. Okay, the testes don't gain a new function at puberty. Puberty rather enables them to perform a function that they already have, just as nightfall enables the pineal gland to perform a function it already has. The same hormone instructs the ovaries to develop eggs. The notion of a response function gives us a principled way of holding that the ovaries have the function of producing eggs throughout the lifetime of the individual, but that at certain phases of life, the complex inner and outer conditions that enable the performance of that function do not obtain. Exactly, like connecting the soul to the body. Thank you, Ivan Neal. And you can see right here, they're going pretty much full Aristotelian. There's it has a power, it just needs to be implemented or realized at certain times. And so this is basically, this whole thing has gone Aristotelian with the teleological theory. I don't know if they realize that's what they're doing right here, but they have a teleological theory with design, and they're using the Aristotelian. Well, does a house builder lose its ability to, does someone who builds homes, do they lose their ability to lose homes when they're asleep? And this was something Aristotle argued against people. They said, no, when you're asleep, the person still has the ability, they have the power to do it, they're just not doing it at the time when they're asleep. It's this is very old Aristotelian theory, but is a powers argument. They have the power to do it. It's just only under certain conditions, but the power exists at all times, except the conditions do not. Okay. Here is a second objection. Does our view have the problematic implication that all human beings are, in fact, both female and male? Human males and females both possess genes that contribute to development of testes, like the FGF9 on autosomal chromosome 13, and genes that contribute to ovary development, like WNT4 on chromosome 1. That brings us perilously close to the conclusion that nobody is, in fact, exclusively female or exclusively male. To simplify greatly, I was thinking about this because your genetics have a lot of stuff that are, that code for many things in your body, and so the idea that some of your genes are going to code for the opposite sex if they were in the right conditions. Yes, we. Well, I thought we did have a definition for that. It's a shit poster on Twitch. So that's an a shit poster on Twitch that talks about Aristotle a lot. I mean, I might qualify a little bit, but I'm not quite there as our buddy Aristotle is. For anyone who does not know, our buddy Aristotle, he is you should go check him out. Ethics, ancient, and expert in ethics and ancient philosophy. He also does Ask Me Anythings here on Twitch. You can check his link out there. I really should update the links on YouTube, though. Exactly. He has the potentiality to shitpost. He may not always shitpost, but he has the potentiality to do it. He has that power. And sometimes he realizes that power, quite often. So there's the question. We have a lot of our biology can be used in multiple ways. And so I have, why do men have nipples? It's because, our biology, it's not worth it maybe to remove them, but a male nipple doesn't do anything, whereas female mammalian nipples are used for making milk. It's so does that make me part female because I have nipples? So it's that would seem like a counterexample here. All right. To simplify greatly, in the ordinary case in males, the SRY gene located on the Y sex chromosome produces a transcription factor that upregulates the expression of SOX9, which works together with other genes such as FGF9 to induce differentiation of the equipotential gonad to testes. Wow, is that a sentence? The upregulation of FGF9 expression also leads to the inhibition of the WNT4 gene involved in ovary development. In females, the WNT4 and RSP01 genes help to induce the differentiation of the equipotential gonad into ovaries. They also work together to inhibit the transcription of SOX9, as well as to inhibit enzymes that catalyzes the production of dihydrotestosterone. For these reasons, sexual differentiation in humans is sometimes described as a tug-of-war between two gene regulatory networks, one involved in the formation of ovaries and the other in testes. Yikes. Okay. Viper says, that's how I got my head around gender identity when I was younger. If 1 in 2,000 babies can be born with ambiguous genitalia, then it's not out of the question that ambiguity could be expressed mentally also. Yeah. This is the thing, humans are actually pretty variable along a lot of lines, in genetics, mental stuff, all sorts of things. And so it's that's one way of realizing that there are more than one way that humans can be, even though it may be most people are one or two ways. There's a non-trivial subset of people that are going to be different, and it's just, that's how it is. And it is a non-trivial thing, even if it's 1 in 10,000. For the amount of people that there are, there's gonna be people out there, and calling them just being a minority does not make them bad. It's they are just as human as the rest of us. We've all come down the same genetic tree from whenever we came down, and it's everyone is the same sort of people, and these are the people we have, and they are included in that. So it's that's the thing. Even if it's a minority, it's an included minority. Okay. The question for us is, how should we describe these facts vis-a-vis the notion of biological function? Yeah, because basically they're saying, look, we all start off with a lot of stuff that could be from both sexes. And so if the potentiality is there from the get-go, then we are both potentially male and female, and therefore we are both male and female under this account of powers, kind of, that we could be under the right circumstances. So if the authors say that FGF9 gene has the function of inducing the development of testes, and therefore has the distal function of promoting sperm production, then we are stuck with the implication that nearly all humans are male. And if we say that the WNT4 has the function of inducing ovary development, then for the same reason we must conclude that all humans are also female. Homo sapiens would truly be a hermaphroditic species. Yeah. Let's see what they say. They think that the fatal flaw in this line of reasoning is that it is its implication of a function of a gene to of a function to a gene itself, rather than to the expression of a gene, or even to a change in the expression pattern of a gene, namely its upregulation. Applied to this case, we want to say that the FGF9 gene, that is, the nucleotide sequence on chromosome 13, does not have the function of inducing testes development. We want to say that the upregulation expression of FGF9, an event indirectly triggered by the SRY gene, has the function of inducing testes development. Alright, I'm calling bullshit right here. I just got to. because they are picking and choosing, cherry picking ad hoc what they want to say the important factor is here. And so this I'm just gonna have to call bullshit, that this is a cherry picking argument right here, that they're getting to select which thing that they get to which is the important thing that they get to say is like the important function, and not some other one. But that is again begging the question in my book, because they started from what they wanted and then they picked the relevant thing in the past, but that's begging the question. Vipers asked if they discovered a gene that determined gender identity, would that be the gene Hackman? And I'm sorry, I read it before I said it, so I got the joke, and then I had to read it, so I can't laugh at it. But Ivan Neo laughed at it. That was actually Vipers. That was pretty good. I like that one. I saw, what was that movie with Gene Hackman where he was stealing a lot of gold? It was actually not that bad. I forget what it was. But yeah. Okay. One might suspect that we're splitting hairs by insisting on a deep distinction between attributing a function to a gene rather than to the expression, or even changes to the expression of a gene, but we think it's strongly suggested by ordinary biological and biomedical judgment for two reasons. I'm not claiming this, I'm claiming begging the question, not splitting hairs. They say one consideration that speaks in favor of attributing functions to gene expression rather than to gene qua sequences of nucleotides is that it coheres well with our ordinary judgments about the conditions under which we speak of a dysfunction of sexual differentiation. If the FGF9 gene as such has the function of inducing testes development, then if a person possesses that gene but doesn't have testes, we'd infer the presence of a dysfunction. Heist, written, yes, that's what it was. Vipers, Heist, written and directed by David Mamet. Yeah. Okay. That would imply that nearly all human females have a dysfunctional FGF9 gene, and by implication, a disorder of sexual development. We could apply the same form of reasoning to males. Yeah. So, again, they're saying we're taking the status quo here to use our distinction. So again, I'm not actually buying this. This is good because it says we're using a different concept, the dysfunction one. But again, that's already a status quo thing from what we consider to already to be male and female, which they are trying to define here. So I'm just trying to explain why I'm calling bullshit at this point. That this is where they've begged the question a little bit. All right. They anticipate an objection here. Instead of rejecting the claim that the FGF9 gene has the function of inducing testes, why not say that the FGF9 gene has the response function of inducing testes? That is, why not say that its function is to induce testes, but only in the response to a signal initiated by the SRY? Isn't it inconsistent to say that the ovaries have, throughout the duration of life, the function of producing eggs in response to certain hormones such as FSH, but that the FGF9 does not have, through the duration of its life, the function of initiating testes development in response to the SRY expression? There's a crucial difference, though, between the way we describe the function of, say, FGF9 and the function of the ovary. For the FGF9 and the WNT4 are already expressed at relatively low levels in the equipotential gonad in mammals. Expression of the SRY gene doesn't turn on the FGF9 gene in the way you might flip a light switch. It changes via upregulation its existing pattern of expression. This fact suggests that it's specifically the upregulation of FGF9 expression that has the function of inducing testes development, not the gene as such. As Gross points out, summarizes the point, sex is not determined by the flip of a genetic switch, but by a dose-dependent interplay between opposing signals. Okay, so maybe there's something else going on here, but then we have to say that the dose-dependent interplay between opposing signals is what was selected for in the history, because that's what they were using. It's not the gene, but like the dose-dependent interplay between opposing signals is not what they were saying was selected for before. It was the genes that were selected for, not the dose-dependent interplay. Maybe they can fix that. That might not be terrible, but like again, you see they're trying to pick a different phenomenon because the genes themselves can't do it alone, but then will that actually work with the rest of the paper? And that's a real hard thing to say, okay, what exactly was selected for? Was this dose dependent interplay between opposing signals what was selected for? That doesn't really make sense, does it? Because like you need all this other stuff to be working. And again, it's going to go back to you need to be started from the idea of what you were getting to, the sperm or the egg, and then you can look back and tease all this stuff out. But if you don't start from that position, it's very hard to identify any of this stuff going on in any specific way if you're not looking at it with that view. Okay. A second consideration weighs in favor of our view that a gene as such doesn't have a function, but its changing expression pattern. Given that sex differentiation results from the dose-dependent interplay of two dynamic complex regulatory networks, and that one and the same stretch of DNA can play such diverse and even contrary roles depending on the network in which it's deployed, it strikes us as at least misleading to say things like gene A has function F. It seems more fitting to think that the gene as a developmental resource that cells use to build our bodies, the function of which depends on the complex gene regulatory network in which it's embedded. Okay. I mean, this is fine. They need to talk about it this way. Otherwise, they're going to get themselves in a lot of trouble because we all have the genes that could potentially be used in both men and women, or let's say males and females. And to get out of that, they have to say, well, no, it's a specific interplay of upregulation. But then how do you track that back to the history? Because that makes less sense. You have to have things that were selected for, and is it this complex interregulation? Maybe, but it gets a lot harder. Now I'm repeating myself. All right, let's get through this. We only got a few more pages. Okay, open questions. We close by sketching some avenues of inquiry that our account of sex opens up. Viper says, so I'm on Philosophy Roulette 410. If you were the editor of a periodical, how many of these papers do you think I would have published? I was going to say 10% off the top of my head, but then I was thinking of my review system. You know, if I got a little bit more, things that weren't great but were still good, maybe a little higher. I don't know exactly, but basically things that have positive qualities, and that may not even be good philosophy, but they may have some very nice parts of them. Some things may be really well argued, but didn't have anything much to say. That might get published on the, this is a well-written paper, and you should aspire to these features of it. And then other papers, might have better content, but they're just not that interesting. They're just not they might be technically interesting, but they're just not very well written. And so it's this is why it's been very hard for me to come up with a ranking system, because there's such a variety of qualities that things could have that are worthwhile or fuck up on. I personally, not a very high percentage would be that cover all the bases, well written, interesting, blah blah blah. But there's a good percentage that the reason that they're published is that they have some good quality to them. In a world where anyone can publish a philosophy paper, No Grade Zero is reviewer too. Yeah. So, it's a good question, but, this is why I want to get my reviewing system up, but, I just realized I'm going to have to probably spend hundreds of dollars to make emotes, and I don't want to spend all that money at the moment. But I'm probably going to do it anyway. Yeah. So, but, that's the thing. It's a lot of these papers have some good qualities. Very few of them are actually good. Have a lot of them. So, but that's why they did get published in the first place. There was something good about them. A few of them were real stinkers, and I mean real stinkers that should not have been published. But most of them had something okay about them. But where do you put the cutoff? Again, yeah, not a very high percentage. If it was the seal of approval. I appreciate that, Vipers. Don't like rush yourself on anything. I just want to, this is not super important, but like it would be something I want to get done eventually. Thank you though. Okay. So these are some avenues of inquiry. Yeah, that's true. People do stream art. So like you can and people stream making emotes. I've seen that. Yeah, and we got Ivan's emotes, which are cool. Nice bat. Okay, we do not purport to have the solution to all of these problems. The virtue of our approach is not that it solves all the problems in a ready-made way, but it teaches us how to even begin solving them. In other words, it frames the conversation in a way that makes it clear clear what one would need to find in order to solve these problems. We describe 3 such problems here. First, challenging the sex binary. And on our view, some human beings are neither exclusively male nor exclusively female, but both male and female. Hence, we reject the idea that human sex is binary in the sense that there are only 2 sexes, male and female, and that they are mutually exclusive. Consider, for example, ovotesticular condition, sometimes called true hermaphroditism, which affects 1 in 20,000 people. Such individuals are born with 1 ovary and 1 testis. An individual with this condition would be, on our account, male because they have a part or the process of biological function, which is to produce sperm. Additionally, such individuals would be female because they have a part or process that is the biological function of facilitating the production of eggs. Most people with this condition are infertile, and it goes without saying that nobody can actually perform both the male and female role in human reproduction. But recall that on our view, one's sex is not contingent on one's ability to produce large or small gametes, but on what one is designed to do. Moreover, whether one is designed to produce eggs or sperm depends on whether one possesses certain organs, most notably gonads, that have the biological function of producing eggs or sperm. Okay. Ways of being intersex. Intersex individuals are born with some combination of male and female sexual characteristics, whether these pertain to the genes, the hormones, the inner genitalia, or the outer genitals. Some estimates suggest that 1 to 2% of human beings are intersex, about the same proportion as redheads. This raises the question of what precisely the connection is between being intersex and being male and female. Yeah, see, this is a large percentage. If you're talking about 2% of the population, then like this isn't even like redheads. It's very common sort of thing. Like you can see redheads all over the place. We prefer to think of being intersex not as an alternative to being male or being female, but as representing a slightly different way of partitioning the same space of human diversity. To be intersex is often defined as being born with some combination of male and female sexual characteristics. Since we only invoke parts or processes that have the distal or proximal function of producing gametes, we believe the classification intersex does not capture what it is to be male or female at a sufficiently fine grain of resolution. Nevertheless, we acknowledge the value of the classification for capturing wider developmental variation in sex characteristics between males and females. Accordingly, we believe some intersex individuals are also exclusively male or exclusively female. Okay, so this is basically saying, look, there are things that aren't related to like making sperm or eggs, and you could have, but they are, they go like concurrent often with those things, but then that can be mixed up between males and females, but the ones that are only concurrent don't actually classify you as male or female. It's only the ones that are specific to making sperm or eggs. I mean, yeah, where do you draw the line there? They're drawing the line at sperm or egg production, fine. But again, like, for what purposes does that matter? You have an intersex friend who has written a very insightful blog for years. Cool. We can take a look at that in a bit, but I want to get through his paper. Yeah, so this is the thing. It's like, this is how they're defining it. And it seems, I guess, okay. I don't know enough about this to make any claims about quality here, really. All right, for example, consider infants with so-called blended genital morphologies, such as an enlarged clitoris that resembles a penis or a small penis that resembles a clitoris. In our view, having an enlarged clitoris is one way of being intersex, but it is also consistent with being exclusively female, since genital morphology doesn't facilitate the production of gametes. Of course, our goal is not to question someone's identification as being intersex, but just to point out that being intersex is, in some cases, compatible with being exclusively male or female. female. We emphasize that respecting how someone identifies and what they prefer to be called is an entirely separate matter from how they're classified by biologists, however legitimate we think the classification. Okay, yeah, the link wasn't for stream, but for viewers here or on YouTube that may be interested. Cool. Yeah, so everyone click the link. Can people change their sex? This is a complex question we can't fully answer here. This is because it takes us deep into unanswered questions about the nature of biological functions. Our goal is not to answer the question, but to provide the conceptual framework that we need to start thinking clearly about it. By design, we often think of evolved design, but evolution instilled within us an incredible amount of cognitive and behavioral flexibility or plasticity. This flexibility is what allows us to formulate new goals and to redesign our bodies and minds to better serve those goals. For example, we're more or less constantly redesigning our bodies and minds through trial and error learning and other forms of practice to better fit the contingencies of our local environments. Serena Williams has systematically redesigned parts of her brain and body for the sake of excelling at tennis. Veteran London cab drivers have effectively redesigned parts of their hippocampi to navigate the complex maze of city streets. Such redesign, in our view, gives rise to novel biological functions. We think trial and error and some other forms of learning constitute function-bestowing selection processes in their own right. This idea has been floated for nearly 4 decades in the functions literature. See Garson 2019 for discussion. Evolutionary natural selection doesn't have, if you will, a monopoly on crafting new functions. There's nothing a priori implausible or incoherent about the proposition that an individual can change or modify the functions of their biological parts or processes to better accord with their own goals or aspirations. Yeah, losing my voice. Here we go. I knew this was a long paper, but I had to pick something at the time. Alright, the question of whether one can change one's sex then depends on whether the following can be true of an individual. At time t1, X is designed to produce sperm. At some later time, t2, X is designed to produce eggs. There are subtle questions here about whether at time t2 it is no longer true to say that X is designed to produce sperm, or whether at time t2 X is designed to produce both sperm and eggs. Either way, we think it's an open question of whether one's sex is truly fixed at birth for human beings or whether it can be changed, that is, whether there are certain changes that one can induce that would count as coming to possess through ontogenetic selection processes, parts or processes that have the biological function of producing sperm or eggs. So, here's the thing. You could maybe build in some little alternate functions using, stem cells to make eggs out of those cells, and a different part of your body make sperm out of those cells. Then you have parts of your body that can both produce sperm and eggs. And it's okay, then according to this definition, you are both male and female, full stop, because you now have those things that can do that. So, that would be a sex change operation if you just add one to because you say you started off male because you produce sperm, and then you added the ability to make eggs through some sci-fi cyberpunk add-on, and then then you are both male and female, and that's it according to this definition. Okay, author says, when we speak of sex change, it's vital for us to clarify the term's problematic history. It usually refers to the idea that trans people transition from male to female or female to male through gender-affirming surgeries to change genitalia. Such discussions tend to equate sex and gender, hence claims that being trans amounts to becoming either a trans man or trans woman. First, and as we have stressed, genitalia are not constitutive of sex, and hence a change of genitalia cannot constitute a change in sex. Second, since sex and gender are distinct, a change of sex would not necessarily entail a change of gender. Yes, well, that was the thing about Vipers. It brings a whole new meaning to go fuck yourself. Yeah, so if you the hermaphrodite that possibly had all the different sex organs, could they go fuck themselves? Yes, maybe. Okay, so according to this definition, sex would not necessarily change gender. Third, being trans is not a strictly binary phenomenon in which people become men or women. As Chura et al. Point out, trans people feel a sense of persistent identification with and expression of gender-coded behaviors not typically associated with their sex at birth and are not reducible to erotic gratification, psychopathological paraphilia, or physiological disorder, and which reflect their sense that a single individual should be free to combine elements of different gender styles and presentations or different sex-gender combinations. Given the historically problematic and conceptual dubious connection between sex change and gender, we think the issue of sex change should not be invoked in discussing trans people without accompanying arguments for its relevance. That said, it is an open question whether any kinds of existing or future gender-affirming medical technologies will be able to change someone's sex in our sense. Well, that's what I was saying. The cyberpunk thing where you could just like add a sperm generator or egg generator to your biology at a certain point, that would be their sense. But that's not what other people mean by it. That's fine. They're different meanings. It's just different definition here. If any trans person were to desire to change their bodies to acquire parts and processes the function of which is to produce ova or sperm, as some trans women who desire to give birth do, then they would in effect desire a change in sex, and our notion of this process would become medically relevant. Yeah, that's it. That's just what they're saying here. The only way you can change the sex, according to them, is by gaining, or losing, I guess, the ability to make sperm or eggs. Conclusion. To recap, in our view, the sex of an animal depends not on the gametes that it is capable of making, but on the kind of gametes it's designed to make. We cash out this notion of design in terms of biological function. X is female if and only if X has the biological parts or processes that have the proximal distal biological function of producing eggs. Again, remember, they had to switch to the complex interplay of like different like chemicals in the body. Those are the processes, but it's very complicated because then they're not talking about the biological parts anymore. Just want to point that out right here, that as soon as they had to get away from that, they did that kind of talk, because this stuff is like gets really messy. So I just wanted to point that out right here, that again, you're not talking about that like weird upregulation of stuff anymore. You're talking about parts again. They've enumerated several virtues of this approach. It avoids the pitfalls of the simple starter theory of sex. It helps us grasp the unity of sex despite the numerous empirical and defeasible indicators of sex. It coheres well with our biological thought by deploying the pivotal notion of proper function, and it abstracts appropriately from the mechanistic details of how sex is implemented in any given animal. We've also sought to address some of the urgent social consequences of thinking biologically about sex. In their view, there are three questions that need to be pursued separately. 1. Is an individual biologically female, male, or both? 2. Is an individual a man, woman, or some other gender? And 3. Should an individual be afforded certain benefits, rights, or privileges associated with certain genders? We think the question of whether an individual is biologically male, female, or both is logically independent of the question of whether that individual is a man, woman, non-binary person, and of the question of whether an individual can or should possess any of the rights, benefits, or responsibilities accorded to men, women, non-binary people. Viper says, I consider the biological aspect of sex and gender identity settled. The only real controversy is political, in whether it's appropriate to legislate based on sex or gender. Yeah, I mean, that's going to be the problem. I agree that you can basically pick, like these folks did, some aspect of biology and like stick to your guns and say this is what it is. I mean, is it going to be exactly right? I don't know, but you can definitely do that on the just straight up biology thing, and you know, deal with some of the edge cases as need be. All the other stuff is like completely separate, as these people are trying to argue for their account too, and it will be extremely difficult to figure out. And they're not saying anything about that here, and I'm not making any claims along those lines here either. But yeah, I agree that at least on this account they've made it, and like I've argued along the paper along these during this like reading, that they have problems. I don't think they've like fixed all their problems. I think they beg their question in certain ways, and like, you know, that's okay in like the grand scheme of things. It's not like the worst begging of the question, but like, yeah, you can separate out the biology in certain ways that are basically all right, and then you can, but then once you have to deal with like the psychology of gender and things like that, and the politics and social theory, completely different problem, and it's going to be very hard to solve that sort of stuff. Like the political, legal status, no idea how we're going to get through this stuff. All right. The authors say, we fail to see how an answer to the first question implies an answer to the second question without conflating sex and gender, and we fail to see how an answer to the first entails an answer to the third without engaging in a serious is-ought fallacy. It's a very hot topic here in the UK right now. It's a very hot topic here in the United States. I mean, I was watching Excessive Profanities stream. He was playing the new Harry Potter game. J.K. Rowling, the author of the Harry Potter series, is notorious for being anti-trans at this point on Twitter. And one of his mods, who has been a mod there for years, basically said, unmod me and I'm gone forever or something, like, or just unmod me. And, you know, they basically interrupted his stream, which is very odd for a mod to do. Like, they could have asked him ahead or after. They made a protest in his stream against the thing, and it's like, this is just going to be, you know, and this was in Australia. Because he's Australian, but like this international thing. So I was like, I was watching this play out in real time, and I was like, I had never actually seen it play out in real time. So it's like people here in the U.S., all over the world, or at least as far as I know, the English-speaking world. Okay, so, and the author says, and while we think it's possible that being a certain gender could afford people certain associated rights, privileges, or benefits, we also think that these associated rights, privileges, or benefits can be afforded solely on the basis of first-person authority. Okay. Yeah, so I'm not even sure what this means, first-person authority, but we could read the associated reference. Finally, even if one conflates sex and gender and accepts the perilous and dubious idea that being male or female entails access to certain rights, benefits, or privileges, we've argued that on our view, it is an open question whether one can change one's sex. This would further undermine the pretense of some to use human biology to advance pernicious traditionalist policies about sex. Yeah, so Vipers wants to say where they are. Vipers is free to do so. I have some idea where Vipers is, I believe. Okay, and that's it for this. So, what is there to say? Again, if anyone has questions, let me know. I'm guessing that is what they meant too, that it's a self-declared gender identity. But again, that would fit kind of on the context. I'm not entirely sure. Yeah, so Vipers is in Belfast. Okay, so, yeah, anything else to say? All right, so first of all, this was not a poorly written paper. I actually kind of like it. I think it was well laid out. They started off with the little bit of what they were doing, people they disagree with. Then they went and they talked about other stuff that, some objections. I think they got something wrong here. I think they begged the question. I think they had some other difficulties. But again, if you were only looking to define a way of understanding male and female in terms of sex and not the other social political issues like gender, identity, and anything else, this is going to work for a lot of use cases. Even as they said, other people are going to look at things slightly differently depending on how they want to study the stuff, but this is actually a usable thing for the most part. And like they argued that like they are basically avoiding most of the pitfalls. Do I actually know if they are? No, I am not an expert in this area, but that's what they're saying. And it looks like they kind of, as far as I know, they did a good job in avoiding these pitfalls. Do I think they completely succeeded? No. And this is one of the times where did they really distinguish their account from one of the other accounts? Well, one of them person had an ability thing and they used design talk. These are two sides of the same coin. You can go back to the Aristotle on teleological theory. And like maybe this is just like sort of a reskinning, just a little bit different of account. You move things around, but is it so different? I don't know. But they say they have a little bit better of an account, and maybe they did. Maybe they solved a few more problems that Griffiths did not. But again, abilities or power theories that are based on abilities, and then design talk, it all goes to the teleological, goes back to Aristotelian teleological thinking through the years, through the millennia. But like, yeah. And so that's okay. What is exactly explanatory? Again, something I was harping on. What are you explaining? Are you explaining something in terms of what you've assumed is the distinction between the sperm and the egg size, or are you explaining the difference between the sperm and the egg size? And they're not doing that. They're explaining everything else in terms of this distinction from the get-go. And that's a little bit begging the question sometimes when they get to these hard answers about the what actually are you, where, how do you actually go back and look at what's causing the divergence between the sperm and the egg size, what the sexual dimorphism in animals. And it's like, well, are they defining it off the sperm and the egg size, or are they defining it off independent things? And I don't think they're getting it right all the time, because they have to start, they can't say it's the genes, because the genes can be used in different ways. And so then they're saying it's the upregulation of the genes, and they're saying, well, okay, but then, well, what's causing the upregulation? Well, that's some other gene, and they're gonna have to keep tracking it back farther and farther, or cherry pick what they want, the right phenomena at the right time for it to work exactly as they want it to. Not, again, this is not the easiest thing to pick out, to go show exactly where that has gone wrong, but I think it does go wrong there. Okay. So, any other comments from chat? Otherwise, yeah, it's getting on 3 hours of streaming for me, even though I did a lot of just chatting at the beginning.